The scent of new car interior, a mix of clean upholstery and polished plastic, was supposed to be the smell of my new beginning. At 68 years old, a widow of just 3 months, buying that silver sedan was the first thing I'd done for myself since Arthur's heart gave out. It was my declaration to the universe that Clara Henderson was still here, and she intended to keep living. The next day my son David came over. He didn't knock. He found me in the kitchen, picked up the new key fob from the counter, and closed his fist around it. "You don't need this," he said, his voice colder than the marble under my fingertips. "Tomorrow Sarah and I are traveling with her family. I can drop you off at Pinecrest Manor on the way." I was paralyzed. My own son, the person I brought into this world, had just told me I no longer had the right to live my own life. So, as he drove down the highway in my car, I sent him a text message. Just 3 words. "Check the glove box. My name is Clara Henderson. Until 3 months ago, I was married to the love of my life, Arthur, for 42 years. He was a mechanic, a man who fixed things with his hands and his heart. When he died, the world didn't just stop. It shattered. The house we'd shared became a museum of a life I could no longer touch. His favorite armchair held the ghost of his shape. His workshop out back was a silent, sacred space. I drifted through rooms filled with a deafening silence, wondering what I was supposed to do with the decades I had left. The grief was a physical weight, pressing me into the mattress each morning. I didn't want to eat, to see anyone, to exist in a world that didn't have Arthur in it. But one morning, holding a faded photograph of us laughing on a beach in Maine, I heard his voice clear as day in my mind. "Clara girl," he'd always say, "as long as this old heart is beating, you've got a reason to get up. Don't you dare sit around waiting for the end. Go out and find it." He was right. He always was. That was the day I decided to start over. Our old station wagon, a faithful blue beast Arthur had maintained with endless patience, seemed to grieve him too. It sputtered and died a week after the funeral. The diagnosis from the garage was final. It was beyond saving. So, using a portion of the life insurance money and our shared savings, I made a decision. I would buy a new car. Not a luxury model, but something safe, reliable, and utterly mine. It would be the chariot for my new chapter. The dealership was bright and intimidating. A kind young salesman named Leo saw my hesitation and gently guided me. And then I saw it. A compact silver sedan, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It looked like independence. When I sat in the driver's seat, my hands on the wheel, I felt a spark I thought had died with Arthur. "Hope." Leo patiently explained the features, and when he told me the price, $9,200, I knew I could manage it. This money was mine, earned through a lifetime of work and sacrifice with Arthur. Signing the papers, I felt a profound sense of ownership. The title was in my name alone. Clara Henderson. Driving it off the lot, the quiet hum of the engine and the smell of possibility filled the cabin. I cried, tears of sorrow for the man who wasn't in the passenger seat, and tears of joy for the woman who was taking this step for them both. I drove home as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, and I knew Arthur would be proud. I parked the silver car in my driveway, admiring it for a long moment. It was more than metal and glass. It was a promise. I left the keys on the kitchen table and called David. I wanted to share my victory with him. The phone went to voicemail. Sweetheart. It's Mom. I bought a car today. A new one. I'm feeling really good about it. Come see it when you can. I love you. I hung up, my heart light, imagining his surprise. The next morning I was full of plans. A trip to the market, a visit to my friend Beatrice, maybe even a drive to the cemetery to tell Arthur all about it. I was on my second cup of coffee when I heard a car pull up. My heart leapt. David had come. But when I opened the door, my smile froze. He stood there with his wife Sarah. Neither of them was smiling. Their expressions were stern, resolved. "Mom," David said, brushing past my greeting. He marched into the kitchen, his eyes locking onto the keys. Sarah followed, offering me a tight, dismissive nod. The air grew heavy. "We need to talk," David said, his voice flat. He picked up the key fob, turning it over in his hand. "I heard you made a purchase." "Yes," I said, my voice too bright. "That's why I called. Isn't it wonderful?" His interruption was like a door slamming shut. "No, Mom. It's not. You don't need a car. Not at your age. Your reflexes aren't what they were. It's a dangerous, unnecessary expense." I felt the verbal slap sting. "David, I passed my vision test with flying colors. This is my money, my decision." He shook his head, the way one does with a petulant child. "This isn't a discussion, Mom. Sarah and I are going on a trip. Our SUV is in the shop. We're taking your car." Before I could process the words, his fist closed around my keys. "No." I cried out, my voice shrill with panic. "David, those are mine." He was already walking towards the door. I followed them, my pleas turning desperate. "David, stop. You can't do this. I'm your mother." He paused on the front step and turned. The look in his eyes wasn't from my son. It was from a stranger. Impatient, contemptuous. "Enough, Mom. You're living in this big house alone, clinging to the past. It's not healthy. We think it's time you considered Pinecrest Manor. A good place. They'll take care of you. I can drop you off tomorrow." The words nursing home sucked the air from my lungs. He may as well have told me I was already dead. "David, no. This is my home." He sighed, a sound of profound annoyance. "Don't make this difficult. We'll talk when we get back." And with that, he got into my car, my silver symbol of freedom, started the engine, and drove away with Sarah in the passenger seat. I stood in the driveway, watching my life disappear down the street. I stumbled back inside, collapsing onto the living room sofa. The silence of the house, once comforting, now felt mocking. I cried until I had no tears left, mourning not just the car, but the betrayal, the utter demolition of the relationship I thought I had with my son. The pain was a sharp breaking thing in my chest. But then something shifted. The grief began to curdle, transforming into a cold, hard, and utterly clear rage. In that clarity, I remembered my visit to Frank. Frank had been Arthur's best friend and a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer. A week after buying the car, a nagging feeling had driven me to his office. I'd shared my vague fears about David and Sarah's growing interest in my finances. Frank hadn't dismissed me. "Precaution isn't paranoia, Clara," he'd said. "It's wisdom." Together, we had assembled an arsenal. Frank prepared a notarized letter stating the car was my sole property and that unauthorized use constituted grand theft auto, for which I would press charges. He attached copies of the title, registration, and my clean driving record. But we went further. We updated my will. The old one left everything to David. The new one disinherited him entirely, leaving my estate to various charities. Finally, we had a doctor sign an affidavit affirming my sound mental and physical health, preempting any attempt to declare me incompetent. This entire packet lived in the glove box of my new car. The cold rage solidified into resolve. I picked up my phone. David would be on the highway by now, probably smug, thinking he'd won. I found his contact and typed 3 words that held the weight of my reclaimed power. "Check the glove box." I pressed send. Then I waited, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My phone erupted. David's name flashed on the screen. Call after call. I let them all go to voicemail. Let him sweat. Let him feel a fraction of the powerlessness he'd inflicted on me. Text messages followed, growing increasingly panicked. "Mom, what is this? Please call me." Finally, the message I was waiting for. "Mom, please don't do this. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. Don't call the police." I let another 10 minutes of silent terror pass for him before I replied. "Bring my car back. Now." His response was immediate. I'm turning around. I'm 3 hours away. I'll be there. I promise. I put the phone down. It wasn't joy I felt, but a profound, weary sense of justice. I changed into a nice dress and put on lipstick. I would face him not as a victim, but as a woman in command. I called Frank. It happened, I told him. He took the car. He found the documents. He's on his way back. Frank was silent for a moment. I'm sorry, you were right, Clara. What do you want to do? I want to talk to him. I just need you on standby. I'm here, Clara. You're doing the right thing. You're a brave woman. The wait was long. I thought of all the years, all the sacrifices, the second jobs to pay for David's piano lessons, the unwavering support through his rocky 20s. I thought of Sarah, and how her arrival had slowly poisoned him against me, turning my son's love into avarice. The sound of my car pulling into the driveway was both a relief and a fresh wave of pain. David got out alone. He looked pale and shrunken, clutching the manila envelope. He rang the doorbell, a small telling act. I opened the door and met his terrified eyes. Come in, I said, my voice steady. I led him to the living room and gestured for him to sit. He was a scolded child. I read it, he whispered. All of it. Then tell me, David, I said, my gaze unwavering. Tell me what you did wrong. He swallowed. I stole your car. I said horrible things. About the home. You weren't thinking? I pressed. Or you were thinking your mother was a feeble old fool you could bully. He broke down sobbing. It was Sarah, she said. He caught himself. Ah, I said. So you're a man who can't think for himself. I laid out my terms. The documents were a sword of Damocles. The will stood. The police were a phone call away. This is your only chance, David. If you ever disrespect me again, I will use every one of these papers. I told him he needed to start individual therapy to understand why he allowed this. Until I saw real sustained change, our contact would be minimal. He was not welcome in my home. As he left, he tried to hug me. I took a step back. Not yet. I need time. You need to earn back the right to touch me. The hurt in his eyes was real, but so was my resolve. I watched him get into a waiting taxi and drive away. I closed the door, my body trembling with adrenaline and grief. I had won, but I had also lost the son I thought I knew. The next day, an unexpected car pulled into my driveway. Sarah. She launched into a tirade the moment I opened the door. How dare you threaten your own son? Over a car. You're a bitter, lonely woman trying to make everyone miserable. I let her spew her venom, then I spoke calmly. Get off my property. She stared, incredulous. I'm not leaving until. I pulled out my phone. Leave or I call the police for trespassing. The hatred in her eyes was pure, but she left, vowing this wasn't over. I needed to reclaim my life for me. I called my friend Beatrice and told her everything. Her support was unwavering. She reminded me that setting boundaries is an act of love, for yourself. We made plans for lunch, and for the first time in years I talked about my own dreams. One in particular surfaced, to see the ocean at sunrise, a trip Arthur and I had always postponed. Empowered, I booked a room at a small coastal inn for the weekend. I drove myself the 5 hours, the open road a balm to my soul. I ate dinner alone, walked on the moonlit beach, and felt a peace I hadn't known since Arthur's death. The next morning I watched the sun rise out of the sea, a breathtaking spectacle of fire and light. I cried, but this time they were tears of healing and profound gratitude. Sitting there on the sand, I sent David a message. I told him where I was and what I had done. I told him I forgave him, not for his sake, but for my own peace. But I was clear. Forgiveness was not forgetting. Our relationship was forever changed, and rebuilding it would require time and consistent proof of his change. I ended the message with, I love you, but now I also love myself. And that is something I will never negotiate again. I returned home a different woman. David's response came later, thanking me for the chance and confirming he'd started therapy. The future of our relationship is uncertain, but the future of my own life is not. I drive my silver car where I please. The legal packet is now in my safe, but its lesson is etched on my heart. My son thought he could take my car and my dignity. What he found in the glove box was the reflection of a strong woman he'd forgotten existed. A woman who learned, finally, to live for herself. The quiet in the house felt different upon my return from the coast. It was no longer a silence of absence, but one of possibility. I found myself humming as I unpacked my small bag, the scent of salt air still clinging to my sweater. A message from Beatrice was on my phone. So, tell me everything. Did the ocean work its magic? I smiled and typed back. It did. I feel like a new chapter has truly begun. David's messages became a weekly ritual. Every Sunday evening, an update would arrive. Session 4 today. We talked about my relationship with Dad. It was harder than I expected. Session 6. I'm starting to see patterns I don't like. I read them carefully, but I held my response. I was a fortress, and his words were mere taps on the outer walls. Proof would require a sustained siege on my doubts, not just announcements of intent. I started a list. Not a to-do list, but a to-experience list. At the top I wrote learn something new. On a whim, I drove to the local community center and signed up for a beginner's pottery class. The feel of the cool, wet clay on my hands was messy, grounding, and utterly absorbing. For 2 hours I didn't think about David or Arthur or nursing homes. I only thought about the shape growing between my hands. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was David's. I answered cautiously. Clara? It's Dr. Evans. David's therapist. My heart jumped into my throat. He's given me permission to reach out to you. He's working very hard in our sessions. I can't discuss details, but I can tell you his engagement is genuine. I thanked her, my mind reeling. This was an action, not just a word. A small crack appeared in my fortress wall. The first test came unexpectedly. David texted. Mom, I know I'm not supposed to come over, but I have something for you. It's not a gift, just something I found. Can I leave it on the porch? Suspicion warred with curiosity. I agreed. An hour later I found a small flat box. Inside was a restored photo of Arthur and me on our wedding day. A photo I thought had been lost years ago. There was no note. The gesture was so specific, so personal, and asked for nothing in return. It was the first thing that truly gave me pause. I had lunch with Beatrice and told her about the photo. He's trying, Clara, she said gently. But the question is, are you ready to let him? I didn't have an answer. The betrayal was a deep bruise that still ached in certain lights. Trust, once shattered, doesn't reform into the same shape. It becomes something new, more fragile or more resilient. I didn't yet know which this would be. My pottery class became my sanctuary. I was terrible at it, but my teacher, a patient woman named Maria, said, "The clay doesn't judge. Just is. And so are you." I made a lopsided bowl. It was ugly, but it was mine. I glazed it a deep oceanic blue, the color of my sunrise. Creating something, however imperfect, felt like an act of defiance against a world that had tried to make me passive. David's messages began to change. They became less about his therapy and more about reflections. I remember today how you used to let me stay up late to watch the stars with Dad. I forgot that. I've been thinking about that time I failed my driving test and you just hugged me and said, "We'll try again next week." No lecture. He was rebuilding the bridge between us, memory by memory. The specter of Sarah still loomed. David never mentioned her in his texts. I wondered about their marriage, if it was fracturing under the weight of his self-examination. Part of me hoped it was a dark, ungenerous part that wanted her gone. The better part of me knew that for David to be truly well, He had to find his own path, with or without her. I decided to visit Arthur. I brought the lopsided blue bowl and placed it by his headstone. I made this, I told him. It's awful, but I love it. I told him about the coast, about David's therapy, about the photo. I'm so angry at him, Arthur. And I'm so sad. But I'm also living. Really living. I hope that's enough. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and I chose to take it as a yes. A breakthrough arrived in a simple text. Mom, I ended things with Sarah. I'm staying in a temporary apartment. It was my decision. It was the right one. The message was stark, devoid of drama. It was the most powerful thing he had ever said to me. He had chosen. He had chosen himself, and in doing so, had chosen the possibility of a relationship with me based on truth, not manipulation. I invited him for coffee. In a public place. A neutral zone. When I saw him walking towards the cafe table, he looked older, thinner, but his eyes were clearer. There was no trace of the cold stranger who had taken my keys. We talked about the weather, the pottery class, his new apartment. It was stilted, awkward, but it was a start. When he left, he didn't try to hug me. He simply said, "Thank you for this, Mom." I started volunteering. I'd always loved animals, so I began spending Tuesday afternoons at the local shelter, socializing cats. The unconditional, simple affection was healing. The shelter manager, a jovial man named Tom, joked that I had a gift with the most skittish ones. "You're just patient," he said. "You don't force it. You just let them come to you." The parallel to my own life was not lost on me. David and I settled into a new cautious rhythm. A weekly coffee. Occasional texts sharing mundane things. A movie he'd seen, a book I was reading. We were two people rediscovering each other, building a new relationship from the rubble of the old one. The love was still there, but it was now guarded by firm, respectful boundaries. I received a letter from Sarah's lawyer. It was a formal inquiry about marital assets, specifically questioning if David had used joint funds to contribute to my car. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I sent a copy of the bill of sale and my bank statement, showing the clear transfer from my personal account. I never heard from them again. It was her final, grasping act, and it fizzled into nothing. 6 months after the glove box incident, David asked if he could see the house. I felt a clench of anxiety, but I agreed. He walked through slowly, his hands in his pockets. He stopped in front of his father's workshop, its door still closed. "I miss him," he said, his voice thick. "I think I was so angry he left that I took it out on you." It was the first time he had articulated the root of his behavior. We cried together that day, for Arthur, for what was lost, and for what might still be saved. My to-experience list grew. I went to a movie by myself. I tried sushi for the first time. I joined a book club with Beatrice and fiercely defended a character everyone else hated. With each small act, the woman known only as Arthur's wife or David's mother receded, and Clara, in all her imperfect, curious glory, stepped forward. David, with my hesitant permission, began visiting his father's workshop. He'd spend hours there, slowly cleaning, organizing Arthur's tools. He wasn't a mechanic, but he said it made him feel close to him. One day, he presented me with a small, beautifully carved wooden bird. "Dad was teaching me this a long time ago," he said. "I finally finished it." The gesture was a circle closing, a thread of his father's love woven back into our lives. On the 1-year anniversary of Arthur's death, David and I drove to the cemetery together in my silver car. We placed flowers and stood in a comfortable silence. "He'd be proud of you, Mom," David said quietly. "For the car. For everything." I looked at my son, his face etched with a year of pain and growth, and I finally felt the last of the cold rage melt away. It was replaced by a cautious, hard-won warmth. Today I sit on my porch drinking my morning coffee. My silver car is in the driveway. My lopsided blue bowl holds fruit on my kitchen table. David is coming for dinner tonight. His first time in the house since that terrible day. The road here was longer and more painful than I ever imagined. Justice wasn't a single moment in a glove box. It was 1,000 small choices to choose myself, to set boundaries, to allow for the possibility of change without guaranteeing it. My name is Clara Henderson. I am 69 years old. I am a widow, a mother, a potter, a volunteer, a reader, and a driver of my own destiny. The story isn't about how my son betrayed me anymore. It's about how I saved myself.